The smell of roasted lamb and mashed potatoes filled the house, the kind of dinner that used to mean celebration. My mother had polished the silverware, my father wore his favorite navy sweater, and my brother, Daniel, sat at the head of the table, the golden child, as always. It had been months since I last joined them for dinner, and truthfully, I wasn't sure why I came. Maybe a part of me still hoped they'd see me, not as a disappointment, but as family. We talked about the usual things at first: Daniel's promotion, his new car, his brilliant ideas. Every word that left their mouths was coated in pride. When they turned to me, the tone changed. Lighter, polite, almost forced. I mentioned that I had started my own small design studio, that clients were slowly coming in. My father's smile didn't reach his eyes. "That's nice," he said flatly. My mother added, "Well, not everyone can be as successful as Daniel." I laughed awkwardly, trying to brush it off, but it was Daniel who leaned back in his chair, smirking, and said, "Yeah, maybe one day you'll get there." The room went silent for a second, long enough for my chest to tighten. I wanted to say something, anything, but before I could, my mother sighed dramatically. "You just don't have his drive, sweetheart. You were always the emotional one." Their words burned like salt on an old wound. I stared down at my plate, pushing food around just to keep my hands from shaking. Every memory of them favoring Daniel flashed through my mind. The extra tuition, the new laptop, the way my achievements were treated like afterthoughts. Finally, my father raised his glass and said with a chuckle, "To Daniel, the one who makes us proud." Everyone clinked their glasses, except me. My throat ached, but I forced a smile, pretending to drink. The clinking of silverware filled the silence that followed, but inside me, something cracked. For the rest of the evening, I barely spoke. I watched them laugh together, share stories, and compare lives as if I wasn't even there. When dinner ended, my mother hugged Daniel tightly, whispering how proud she was. When she turned to me, it was a brief pat on the shoulder, the kind you give an acquaintance, not a daughter. As I walked to my car, I could still hear them laughing through the window. That's when it hit me. No matter what I did, I'd never be their favorite. I wasn't the successful child. I was just the reminder of everything they wished I wasn't. But as I sat in my car, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror, I made a silent promise to myself. If they couldn't see my worth, I'll prove it to myself instead. The following weeks after that dinner felt heavier than usual. I buried myself in work, sketching designs late into the night, trying to turn frustration into something productive. But no matter how much I accomplished, my parents' voices echoed in my mind. "You'll never be as good as your brother." It was like a curse stitched into every thought I had. One Sunday afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. Her tone was chipper, falsely warm. "Daniel's having a little gathering tonight to celebrate his promotion. You should come." I hesitated, but she added quickly, "It would mean a lot if you showed up." So, against my better judgment, I went. When I arrived, their house was alive with laughter, the kind that makes you feel like an outsider before you even walk in. Daniel was surrounded by friends and family, a drink in his hand, his grin effortless. My mother hugged me briefly, but her eyes darted away almost instantly, scanning the room for him. Dinner began, and I tried to blend in, smiling where it seemed appropriate. But halfway through, Daniel stood up with a raised glass. "I couldn't have done any of this without my amazing parents," he said. Everyone applauded. Then, with a smirk, he added, "And of course, my sister, the dreamer, always chasing her little art projects." The room erupted in laughter. My chest tightened. My mother laughed too, though she tried to hide it behind her napkin. My father patted Daniel on the back, pride glowing on his face. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to scream. Instead, I excused myself and stepped outside into the cold night air. The stars were faint, barely visible behind the city lights. I leaned against the porch railing, fighting back tears. Through the window, I could still hear their laughter, my family, celebrating without realizing they were breaking me a little more each time. Then the door opened behind me. It was my father. "You're being dramatic again," he said, his tone flat. "Daniel was just joking. Don't make everything about you." His words hit like a slap. I turned to him, shaking. "Do you ever even listen to yourself? You've spent my entire life reminding me that I'm not enough. I've done everything to make you proud, and it's never good enough." He sighed, eyes cold. "Maybe if you worked harder, you'd understand." And with that, he walked back inside. That was the moment I realized there was no fixing this, no right words, no perfect success that would ever make me their equal. The problem wasn't me. It was the space I was born into, a family that measured love in achievements and saw empathy as weakness. I walked to my car, heart pounding, tears blurring the streetlights. For the first time, I didn't cry because of them. I cried because I was done chasing something I would never have. That night, as I drove home, I made another silent promise. This time, I wasn't just going to prove myself, I was going to free myself. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and an ache in my chest that felt too heavy for words. But beneath the exhaustion, something inside me had shifted, a quiet strength I hadn't felt in years. I sat at my small kitchen table, sipping lukewarm coffee, and stared at my sketchbook. For once, I didn't draw for approval. I drew what I wanted. The lines flowed easily, raw and real, the kind of art I used to love before I started trying to make my parents proud. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, that creative spark became my escape. I poured every ounce of pain, anger, and disappointment into my work. My small studio, once barely surviving, started to bloom. Clients began recommending me to others, and one day, an email came from a major interior design firm. They wanted to collaborate on a project. For the first time in my life, I felt seen, not because of who I was related to, but because of what I could create. I wanted to tell my parents, to show them I was finally doing something real. But then I remembered the last conversation, my father's cold eyes, his dismissive tone. I decided I'd rather let my success speak for itself. Weeks later, my firm's new project made the local news. My designs were featured in a magazine, and suddenly people started reaching out. Friends congratulated me, clients booked months in advance. It felt surreal, like I was finally building something that was mine. Then, one evening, my phone rang. My mother. I hesitated before answering. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice overly sweet. "We saw your article. Your father and I are so proud." I could hear him in the background saying, "Tell her we always knew she had potential." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They hadn't called me in months, not even after the fight. And now, suddenly, they were proud? I took a deep breath and said quietly, "Thank you." There was an awkward silence, and then my mother added, "You should come for dinner this weekend. Daniel will be there too. He'd love to hear all about your work." For a moment, I considered it. The old part of me, the one that still longed for their love, almost said yes. But something inside me stopped. I realized I didn't need their validation anymore. I had already proved myself, and not to them, to me. So I smiled faintly and replied, "I'll think about it." Then I hung up. That night, I sat in my studio surrounded by my sketches, the faint hum of music in the background. For the first time, the silence didn't hurt. It felt peaceful, because I finally understood my worth was never theirs to define. By the end of the week, I decided to go. not because I needed their approval, but because I needed closure. I wanted to face them, not as the insecure daughter they used to belittle, but as someone who had finally found her strength. That Saturday evening, I walked into their house, the same house where countless arguments had echoed over the years. The scent of my mother's cooking hit me immediately. Comforting, familiar, and yet somehow suffocating. Daniel was already there, his voice loud and confident as he talked about his new business trip to Europe. My parents listened with glowing admiration. When my mother saw me, she smiled, the polite kind that never quite reached her eyes. "You made it," she said. My father nodded briefly from his chair. I took a seat at the table, my heartbeat steady but strong. This time, I wasn't there to blend in. Dinner began as usual, filled with Daniel's stories and my parents' laughter. I waited quietly, listening, until my father turned to me and said, "So, how's that little art thing going?" I looked him straight in the eyes and said calmly, "It's not a little thing anymore. I own a design firm now. We just finished a project with a national company." The table went silent. My mother blinked, unsure of what to say. Daniel chuckled under his breath. "Wow, impressive. Guess dreams do pay off sometimes." I smiled slightly. "They do, when you stop chasing people who don't believe in you." My words hung in the air, heavier than I expected. My father frowned, setting down his fork. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said steadily, "I spent years trying to make you proud. Every decision I made, school, career, everything was about earning a kind word from you. But it was never enough, and I finally realized it's not my job to prove my worth to you." My mother shifted uncomfortably. "Sweetheart, that's not fair." "It's more than fair," I interrupted softly, "because I'm done pretending. I'm not the failure you made me out to be. I'm not Daniel, and I don't need to be. I've built something on my own, without your help, without your approval." For a moment, no one spoke. Then my father leaned back, his expression unreadable. "So, what do you want? An apology?" I shook my head. "No, I just wanted you to see who I've become, and to understand that your words don't define me anymore." I stood up, my hands trembling slightly but my voice calm. "You raised me to believe love was conditional, that it had to be earned. But I've learned it isn't. And I won't keep trying to earn it from people who only give it when it's convenient." Daniel looked away, my mother's eyes filled with something close to regret, and my father stayed silent. I took one last look around the table, the same table where I had once felt invisible, and then I smiled. "Thank you for dinner." And with that, I walked out, leaving the weight of years behind me. As the door closed behind me, I realized something simple, yet freeing. They hadn't changed, but I had, and that was enough. The next few days passed quietly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was unfinished. I had finally stood up for myself, yet a strange emptiness lingered. Not sadness, exactly, but the realization of just how deep the cracks in my family had always been. Then, a few days later, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Hi, this is Daniel's wife, Emily. I thought you should know something." My heart skipped. I barely knew Emily. She was polite during family gatherings, but always kept her distance. She asked if we could meet for coffee. When we sat down, she looked nervous, stirring her drink for a long time before speaking. "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I've always admired you. I know how your parents treat you, and how they talk about you when you're not around." I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" She sighed, glancing out the window. "They've always compared Daniel to you, but not the way you think. They make him feel like he has to stay perfect or else he'll lose their love too. It's not about you being less, it's about them needing someone to feel superior to. It's toxic, and it's breaking him too." Her words hit me like a wave. I had spent years believing Daniel had it all. The love, the praise, the validation I craved. But now I saw it differently. He wasn't free either. He was trapped in their expectations, just like I had been. Emily continued softly. He's been struggling. The pressure's gotten to him. He drinks more than he admits. He told me last night that he wishes he had your courage to walk away. I sat there, stunned. For years, I had carried resentment, believing he was the enemy. But in that moment, I realized he was just another casualty of our parents' approval system. And somehow, that made the pain a little easier to bear. When I got home that night, I sat in silence for a long time. I thought about all the years we'd both spent trying to earn something that was never real. Conditional love, wrapped in pride and performance. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I just felt free. I texted Daniel. Just a simple message. I hope you're okay. I'm here if you ever want to talk. He didn't reply that night, but I didn't need him to. I had finally understood something important. Sometimes healing isn't about changing others. It's about freeing yourself from the story they made you believe. And as I looked around my quiet apartment, surrounded by the art I created, pieces that told my truth, I smiled. The silence that once felt lonely now felt peaceful, because I finally knew. I wasn't less. I was just different. And that was enough. Weeks passed, and life began to settle into a quieter rhythm. I focused on my work, on my art, on rediscovering who I was without my family's constant criticism humming in the background. It was strange, almost foreign, to wake up and not feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. For the first time, I was living for myself. One evening, as I painted, my phone rang. It was Daniel. I froze, staring at his name on the screen. We hadn't spoken since that disastrous dinner. My hand trembled as I picked up. His voice was softer than I remembered. "Hey," he said, almost hesitant. "Emily told me you met. I just wanted to say thank you." I sat in silence, unsure how to respond. He continued, "You were right that night. About everything. Mom and Dad, they never really saw us, did they? Not for who we are." Hearing him admit that cracked something open inside me. For years, I dreamed of this. Acknowledgement, understanding. But now that it was here, I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt human. "No," I said quietly. "They didn't. But we don't have to keep living in that story." Daniel exhaled, the sound heavy but relieved. "I miss having a sister," he admitted. "Not the one they compared me to. Just you." Tears stung my eyes. "Then let's start there," I whispered. And for the first time in a long while, we talked, really talked, about our childhood, about the pressure, about how much we'd both been carrying alone. It wasn't perfect. There were pauses, awkward silences, but underneath it all was something real, the beginning of forgiveness. After we hung up, I sat quietly, letting the moment sink in. The ache in my chest was still there, but it wasn't sharp anymore. It felt like a scar, a reminder of what I'd survived. The next day, Daniel texted me a photo of an old drawing I'd made as a kid. It was crumpled but intact. A sketch of the two of us standing under a tree, smiling. "Found this in Dad's attic. Thought you'd want it back." I smiled through tears, saving the photo. That small gesture, after years of silence and resentment, meant more than any apology ever could. Healing, I realized, doesn't always come in grand moments. Sometimes it starts with a simple call, a single message, a quiet decision to try again. And as I looked at that old drawing, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: hope. Months later, life had begun to bloom in new colors. The pain hadn't vanished, but it had softened, like waves smoothing rough edges on a stone. I had learned to breathe again, to laugh without guilt, and to stop measuring my worth by anyone else's reflection. My home, once filled with silence, now echoed with soft music, the hum of creation, and peace. One Sunday morning, I received an unexpected letter in the mail. The handwriting was unmistakably my mother's. Neat, careful, almost rehearsed. My hands shook as I opened it. The letter was short. She didn't apologize, not directly, but her words trembled between the lines. "We didn't realize how much we hurt you.
I hope you're doing well. Your father asks about you sometimes." For a long moment, I just stared at those words. The old version of me, the one desperate for approval, would have rushed to reply, eager to fix things. But I wasn't her anymore. I placed the letter on my desk, next to the photo Daniel had sent me, and smiled sadly. Some relationships are meant to heal slowly, in their own time. Others are meant to rest in peace. A few weeks later, I met Daniel for coffee. He looked lighter, freer, as if he too had let go of something heavy. We talked for hours about our parents, about life, about forgiveness. There was no bitterness left between us, only the quiet understanding of two people who had survived the same storm. When we parted, he hugged me tight. "You're doing great, sis," he said softly. "You always were." Those words lingered with me all the way home. That night, I stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who sat at the family dinner table, shrinking under her parents' disapproval. I wanted to tell her that she made it, that one day she'd build a life full of peace and self-respect, and that she'd stop needing anyone's permission to feel proud of herself. Because that's what healing really is. Not erasing the past, but learning to live with it without letting it define you. And as I turned off the lights, I whispered to myself, "I'm enough." And for the first time, I truly believed it.